Rosy here from rosypena.com, a fashion, sewing, and lifestyle blog. Welcome back to my channel. I am so excited that you're here. So in today's video, we're going to be doing another awesome episode of Sewing with Rosy, and we're going to be making Vogue 97969. So we're going to be using this really cool butterfly print that I got from Joann Fabrics. I'll try to link to a similar option below. So the type of fabric that you want to choose is like a lightweight challis, a rayon, even a cotton, something that is going to be nice and lightweight and flowy. Since this is a really loose fitting top, you don't want anything too thick or too heavy for this, otherwise it's going to feel really bulky. So again, this is a really fun loose fitting dress, Mccalls 7969. You are going to also need some type of an interfacing. The neckband on this dress is interfaced. This I just picked up from Walmart, but I'll have a similar option linked in the description bar below as well. So interfacing just adds a little bit more of an added structure to parts of a garment that needs some more stability. Like I said, this I got in a pack from Walmart. It's very cheap, very inexpensive, and I'll have a similar option linked in the description bar below. So go ahead and grab your fabric and your pattern and we can go ahead and get started. Alright you guys, in today's video we're going to be working on Mccalls 7969, and the fabric that I'm going to be using in today's video is a lightweight challis fabric that I got from Joann Fabric. I'll have a similar option linked in the description bar below. The first thing you want to do is to fold your fabric with right sides together and the selvage edges meeting. Then you just want to lay your pattern pieces out according to the grain line and cut out your pattern pieces. The pattern pieces that we're going to need is pattern piece number 1, which is your bodice front, and you should have cut out 2 separate pieces of this. Next, you should have pattern piece number 2, which is your bodice back, and you should have one of these cut on the fold. Make sure you're transferring all of those notches. The next thing you're going to need to cut out is pattern piece number 3, which is your sleeve. So you'll need pattern piece number 4, which is your sleeve binding. You should have cut 2 of these, and make sure you pay attention to that grain line as it's not parallel to the selvage edge. Next, you should have pattern piece number 8, which is your neck binding, and also make sure you pay attention to that grain line as well. Next, you'll need 2 of pattern piece number 9, which is your skirt front and back, and both of these are cut on the fold. First step that we're going to do in the sewing process is to pin our fronts to our back with right sides together at the side seam. So just go ahead and bring your front to your back pieces, again with right sides facing, and you're going to pin along both side seams. Next, you're going to take your sleeve binding and you're going to fold it onto itself with right sides together, and you're going to pin along the short edge. Repeat that to the other sleeve binding as well. Next, you want to grab your sleeve pieces and you're going to fold it onto itself with right sides together, and you're going to pin at that underarm seam. Go ahead and repeat that process to your remaining sleeve as well. Go ahead and grab your interface neck binding pieces, and you're going to fold that with the right sides together, and you're going to pin along that short straight edge. Before you head to the sewing machine, go ahead and grab your front and back skirt pieces, and you're going to place that with right sides together, and you're going to pin along the side seams. Have all of those pieces pinned, go ahead and take your fabric to your sewing machine and you're going to sew along all of the pinned edges with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure to remove those pins as you go and also backstitch at the beginning and the end of your seams. Once you're finished sewing all of your seams, you can neaten them with a serger or your desired method. Before we head back to the table, we're going to create a 5/8 of an inch stitching guide along the sleeve band and also the neck band as well. You just want to take your sleeve binding and sew a 5/8 of an inch stitching guide along that lower seam. Go ahead and repeat that process to your neckband piece as well. Once you finish sewing all of your seams, you just want to take your fabric to your ironing table and gently press to neaten all of those seams. Every time you sew a seam, you want to press a seam with your iron as you go. Now we're going to press up to the wrong side on our sleeve band pieces and also on our neck band piece as well. So you just want to use that stitching guide that you made previously, 5/8 of an inch away from the raw edge, to press up to the wrong side. We're going to create ruffles on the lower edge of our sleeve so we can fit it into our sleeve band. We're also going to create ruffles at the upper edge of the sleeve as well. To gather my fabric, I'm going to use a basting stitch and I'm going to turn the tension setting on my machine to the highest tension setting. And then I'm just going to sew my fabric and it's going to automatically create some gathers. If you'd like to use a more traditional method for gathering your fabric, I'll have a blog post about that linked in the description bar below. Again, you just want to gather along the lower edge of the sleeve and you also want to gather along the upper edge of the sleeve as well. Now that we've gathered our fabric, we're going to take our sleeve binding and we're going to slip that over our sleeve with right sides together, and we're going to pin along that lower edge, adjusting our gathers as needed. Sleeve to your sewing machine, and you're going to sew along the pinned edge with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure to remove those pins as you go, and also make sure you're working on the correct layers. So make sure you have the other side of the sleeve cuff out of the way. To finish the sleeve, we're going to press that seam allowance towards the binding, and then we're going to turn the binding onto itself just over the seam line, and then you want to pin from the right side of the fabric. We're going to be sewing from the right side of the fabric, but we want to make sure that the sleeve binding covers that seam line so that we catch it as we sew. Before we head to the sewing machine, we're going to grab our sleeve on the upper edge and we're going to pin that to our bodice piece with right sides together. We're going to first pin the underarm of the sleeve to the underarm of the bodice, and then we're going to pin the front notch of the sleeve to the front notch of the bodice, and all the way throughout. Then you want to repeat that to the back side of the sleeve and the back side of the bodice as well. So just go ahead and pin your sleeve to your bodice, again with right sides together. Now you can take your fabric to your sewing machine and you're going to sew along the underarm seam first with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure to remove those pins as you go, and also backstitch at the beginning and the end of your seams. Once you've attached your sleeves, we can move on to the sleeve binding. So you just want to sew right along the sleeve binding along that pinned edge. Again, you want to make sure that you catch the underside of the sleeve binding as well. Go slowly during this step and make sure that you're catching both the upper side of the sleeve binding and the lower side as well. Go ahead and neaten any loose threads that you may have, and also press your fabric at your ironing table. And then we're going to pin our interface neckband piece with right sides together along the entire neck of the bodice. So you want to pin first starting at the back and then at the lower side of the bodice, and then you just want to evenly pin the neckband in place all the way throughout the neckline. Go ahead and sew your neckband in place with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, again making sure to remove those pins as you go, and also backstitch at the beginning and the end of your seam. I neaten the seam with a serger, and now I'm going to press that seam towards the neckband. So you just want to press that seam away from the bodice and towards the neckband piece. And then you're going to fold the neckband onto itself, similar to how we did with the sleeve cuff. So just fold that pressed edge over the seam line, and then you want to pin from the right side of the fabric. Now you want to sew a top stitch along the neckband piece, again making sure that you're catching that underside as well. Once you finish sewing, go ahead and neaten that at your ironing table, gently pressing throughout the neckband in place just to set those stitches and to make sure that everything is nice and neat. Next, we're going to place our right front over our left front at the lower edge, matching those notches, and we're going to pin in place. Then you just want to take that to your sewing machine, and we're going to sew with a basting stitch. So again, a basting stitch is just the longest stitch setting on your machine. It's a temporary stitch used to temporarily hold the fabric together. Once you've sewn that basting stitch, we're actually going to move on to our skirt front and our skirt back. So in an earlier step, you sewed that at the side seam. Now we're going to gather the upper edge of the skirt, again using that gathering technique. So you want to use a basting stitch, and then you want to turn the stitch setting to the highest tension setting. Again, if you prefer the traditional gathering method, I'll have information about that linked in the description bar below. So go ahead and just create a gathering stitch at the upper edge of the skirt. And then you want to go ahead and move on to hemming the lower edge of the skirt as well. So you just want to turn the fabric on the lower edge to the wrong side by 5/8 of an inch, and then you're going to sew very close to that serged edge. This is just going to hem the skirt in place at the lower edge. Once you've finished hemming the skirt and gathering that upper edge, we're going to take our skirt and place that on top of our bodice with right sides together along that lower edge. And we're going to pin matching the side seam of the skirt to the side seam of the bodice. Again, with right sides facing, and then you just want to pin evenly, adjusting those gathers as needed. Once you finish pinning, go ahead and take your fabric to your sewing machine, and then you're going to sew with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, adjusting those gathers as needed and making sure that everything lays nice and even. Go ahead and sew throughout the entire skirt, again making sure to remove those pins as you go, and also backstitch at the beginning and the end of your seam. Once you're done sewing, go ahead and neaten that with a serger or your desired method. Now you can turn your garment with the right sides facing out, and you're all done with Mccalls 7969. Alright you guys, you're all done sewing Mccalls 7969. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Make sure you stick around to the end where I'll insert more photos of me wearing this dress, and also stop by the blog rosypena.com where I'll have a full blog post with more photos, fabric links, and all the good details. I really hope you enjoyed sewing this pattern with me. If you'd like to see more awesome Sewing with Rosy episodes, make sure you hit like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys!